Hello and welcome to the Rabyd Atheist. I'm Rabyd, a former pastor turned atheist, now a compassionate anti-theist. Welcome to my channel. Like and share this video. Join the Rabyd Nation, a nation of people dedicated to normalizing atheism and deconversion by hitting that subscribe button. And if you want to support the channel in a more tangible way, hit the join button and your membership options that lead to citizenship in the Rabyd Nation will be presented to you. Today I want to continue my series called Seeing Behind the Religious Curtain. This series is where I'm going through Jim Palmer's list of things that he thinks the misguided religious establishment doesn't want you to know. It's more, I agree with a lot of this list, and my purpose basically is to create a discussion for those of us deconverting from one religion and into secularism and atheism to process both the deconstruction from the religion and reconstruction of our lives after faith. And so I want to get into it, and this is kind of part two, and this is Jim's second thing that he feels the religious establishment doesn't want you to know, and I agree with it. I want to say that right before I read it. But this is what he says. He says, clergy have no innate authority. Holding a church leadership position or having a theological degree does not imbue a person with special divine authority or superiority. The terms anointed, called, or chosen, or titles such as pastor, priest, bishop, elder, evangelist, or apostle do not confer any innate authority on any individual or group. Now, I have actually spoken on this issue before. I know a month or a couple months ago when I talked about, how the clergy has people bamboozled into thinking that they have some sort of authority simply because they have a title or an honorific, or they've studied theology or Bible, and somehow that gives them more authority to speak on all kinds of matters. But one of the things that people deal with in deconverting is they have trouble with the authority dogma that surrounds church leadership. And not so much that once you're deconverted, you give those people any authority anymore, but you realize how much abuse took place because you at one time believed in that authority dogma and followed it and submitted to it. And because of that, your life has been damaged in some way. You've had different things happen to you. And so you don't really, and it all stems back to you believe this person had authority over your life in spiritual matters, and that carried over into authority in other matters of your life. In my own experience with church leadership in the church, one of the problematic things about this is I think there really is, and this is just my experience, there seems to be a larger proportion of narcissists and sociopaths in church leadership, not just in the pulpit, but also lay leadership as well. Now, I want to be clear, I'm not saying that church leadership is necessarily full of these types of people, but it seems like the proportion is a lot higher than I would see in other organizations dedicated to other things. And that's because there's this innate idea of authority in church leadership that attracts these type of people. I mean, if you want to have this feeling as a narcissist that you're in charge and you're important and everything, your head is truly really up your butt, this is a good way to do it. And I did notice, like in lay leadership as well, people seem to like leadership, but if you look at their lives, it's like they're not as successful in their life, and so they look at church as a way to be successful. And you'd also see people that like to control other people. They like the idea of having authority and power over somebody, and that seems to lead to a lot of that. Now, in deconversion, though, the real issue is getting over the fear factor that I talked about last week, but also the fear factor of religious leadership. Coming to an understanding, as Palmer says, that clergy have no innate authority is the big issue. There's no leadership position or theology degree that gives a person special status in the form of divine authority. That's completely, they say so, but they don't offer any proof so. You'll never see an ordained minister with a picture on his wall of God coming down and actually touching him and saying he's anointed. There's usually a group of people around him doing that, okay? It gives no special status in the form of divine authority. It just means you were given a position, and if you have a degree, you know something about Bible or theology. No honorific given to a minister makes them more special than anybody else, or gives them the power to speak with the divine authority or gives them special authority over others. Now, this is hard to overcome because religious organizations spend a lot of time pushing their own spiritual authority and the authority of their representatives. The talk about authority of church, like Protestants will talk a lot about the authority of Scripture, for instance, and sola scriptura or whatever. And then other will talk about the authority of church traditions or the authority of church leadership. They have to bolster this up because somebody has to interpret the Scripture. Somebody has to interpret church tradition, and because they are interpreters, they are endowed with that same authority. Because you can't have the documents, the holy books questioned. You can't have the traditions of a religion questioned. And so the people that are representing those things also cannot be questioned. Okay, and it gives them that authority. Now, those that are Protestant allow Scripture to be the authority. That allows lay leadership to kind of argue back with their perceived authority as pastors. And it's probably the only good thing about Protestants above some of the other religious notions in Christianity is that Protestants actually, the people in the pew have the ability to argue Scripture with somebody, but then that's why a lot of these ministers go get, theology and Bible degrees, and then they can explain, their position better, and it gives them the ability to finagle the words a little bit better than your average layperson. Now, this is hard to overcome because so many times this is pushed so hard that when you grow up in a church, don't question the pastor, don't question the reverend, don't question the priest. They're God's representatives on earth. They're God's human representatives on earth. And this is pushed into your brain, often from a very early age. It's part of the indoctrination process, is not only teaching about God, but teaching about his church or his religious organization or whatever. And that the people in that are working for your good. They are God's authority on earth in some way, shape, or form. And thus, you really need to accord them more respect and more honorifics. Now, I'm going to give my own personal story. When I was ordained in the Assemblies of God, it was men who prayed over me and gave me the title Reverend. When I was elected pastor 3 times, it was the people of the church that gave me the title pastor. You don't have any pictures of either one of those events where God's coming down, talking to me directly, touching me on the forehead, none of that. It's a pure human action. And once you get that into your realization that every single religious leader is a pure human action, that's when you begin to realize there's no God involved, and there never was. And anyone who's given the same is the same. One of the most difficult times for me as a pastor was when I became an atheist. And you want to know the most disturbing part for me emotionally. It was the simple fact that many gave my opinion on any matter that I talked about more weight than others simply because I had the title pastor, simply because I had the title reverend. My authority was based simply on that title and the perception that I was God's representative on earth. I even had, I remember when I was first in the Congregational church, my now ex-wife came to me with a prayer request, and she was giggling about it because she was talking to a person who wanted to, can you tell your husband to pray for this? Because, he's a pastor, so he might have more clout with God. And I would think about that, and I'm like, no, I don't really have that. But it's this perception that people give you that because you have this stuff, that you have this authority, and it really doesn't exist. The same was true for my degrees in Bible theology. Now, the truth is that, yes, my knowledge in these areas like Bible, ministry, theology, political science, economics, international business, all the things I have degrees and minors and double majors in and whatever, I have more knowledge about those things, but there are other people that also have these degrees that might have a different opinion than mine. It allows me to speak with knowledge, but not necessarily authority unless that knowledge is so true that it's hard to argue with it. And like when I speak on theology, I don't think theology is inherently good or bad anymore. Okay, I don't think that it gives me any weight. When I talk about the Bible, I consider the Bible a work of historical fiction. And so all I'm really saying is I know a lot about this piece of historical fiction. but it doesn't give me any special authority to run anybody's life, okay? It just means that I've studied something a little bit more than everybody else, and that's all it really means. And the authority of that comes from the fact I've studied it, I looked at it, and I can show you what it actually says or what it actually means, or this theological position is actually this. That's all I can really do. Okay, it does that convey some authority, I suppose so, but it's really based on my ability to continue to keep up on that knowledge and keep my knowledge current and things like that, but it's nothing more than that. Now, for me also as a minister, I had people that were in authority over me, and I guess I had a little bit of an advantage in that when I became an independent congregationalist, because at that point I was the authority of the church. There was nobody over me, and I was actually very scared about that, to be honest. And it was one of the reasons I still got with my minister friends to kind of, bounce, my feelings about things off of them, because I felt at least I could get some, feedback on what I was doing. But in the end, for me, it all fell apart. I didn't really have any authority just because I had the word pastor in front of my name. And just because I had a bunch of degrees, I could speak with authority on what I knew. But it doesn't mean that people had to order their life about it. Okay, there's nothing special or spiritual or anything about any of that. It's all man-made. So when you're deconverting, the deconstruction aspect, how do you get over this authority issue? I would say that you should be skeptical of anything a religious leader says. Okay, you need to somehow just say, just because this guy has a title doesn't mean shit. Okay, I hate to cuss at that moment, but I have to emphasize the point that just because the person has a reverend in front of their title doesn't mean they know shit or can speak with authority. It just means that somebody gave them an honorific. In my case, learning how to listen to religious leaders and realize that a lot of what they're saying is very self-motivated and, quite frankly, BS. Okay, and when you realize how much BS it is, you start to get over the fact that these people should have power control of anything, let alone religious flocks. And when you see the indoctrination of it and the cult-like atmosphere of devotion to certain leaders, it's dangerous, and you become a skeptic, not just of religious authority, but the idea of authority in that sense altogether. Any kind of cult-like devotion becomes really kind of, in my opinion, abhorrent to me. Okay, and so getting past it is just kind of, you take all that stuff and you shove it out your house. Okay, you don't even want it in your new house. You just, get rid of it, because you don't want this idea that somebody should have power over you. You taking authority for yourself over yourself is a big thing in deconstruction. Getting rid of the idea that somebody needs to be in charge of your life besides yourself. Okay, and then you reconstruct the idea of learning to let what you know and understand be your true authority instead of some other person is a challenge. Because if you lived your life inside one of these cults or a religious establishment that has a high authority complex, such as the Catholic Church, okay, looking at the priest and realizing they're just a human dude dressed up in clerical garb, and they have no more authority over your life than you have yourself. In fact, you have more authority than they do over your life, is a big reconstruction issue. Getting over the fact that somebody dresses in clerical garb, has an honorific, that doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean anything. Okay? But once again, being a skeptic, okay, of any leadership is a good start. Too many, I see a lot of this in atheism, and it's something that I've cautioned against several times on this channel. But I watch too many people that get out of religion, they blindly suddenly switch their allegiance from religious leaders to political ones. And that's just as dangerous, because to me, religious and political leaders seem to be cut of the same kind of cult-like devotion. I have this title, so therefore I have authority over you kind of cloth. It just acts in a different realm. I've watched people, I was religious and I was conservative, and so I'm immediately going to become a liberal and whatever. And it's like, is that really what you want to do, or do you want to take your own authority or your own sovereignty back? Because to me, the reconstruction issue is taking your own sovereignty over yourself back and not letting anybody else have it. It's your life. It's your way that you want to live. Taking full responsibility for your life. That's the big issue. Now, you got to get over, you got to remove the idea of religious spiritual authority because it's just straight up BS. It is one of the biggest lies that religious establishments of all kinds give, that there's gurus, pastors, clerics, that somehow, because they say so, that God anointed them, or the group of people, the organization says that God anointed them, or this has been passed on for generation to generation, and this person is the vicar of Christ. This kind of crap is what you have to get rid of. But it also means taking, and the best way to do that, in my opinion, the best way to deconstruct that and then reconstruct your life is to realize that you're in charge of your life. You're the sovereign one of your life. Doesn't mean you can't ally with people and work together for common causes, but what it does mean is you better come to your own understandings. When I left the faith, and I use myself as an example, the last thing I wanted to do was just switch one cult to another, of a different type. I didn't want to go from a religious cultic idea to a political cultic idea, okay, because they're the same. Politicians and religions use the same tactics. Just listen to a preacher sometime and then listen to a politician make a speech. And I challenge you to find the difference. There isn't much difference. It's all about appeal to emotion and then getting people to act based on those appeals to emotion. Okay, I learned that as a preacher, and I learned everything I needed to know to be if I wanted to be a successful politician, I probably could do it, simply based on what I'd learned in church, okay, and being political in church. They're very much the same thing in nature. They just operate in different realms. And so taking back the sovereignty over your own decisions. So you don't want to just, I didn't want to just, okay, I used to be, kind of a moderate, religious person. Do I go full-blown liberal on every issue? And the issue, after a while, I said, no, I need to study each issue independently and be independently minded about what positions I hold instead of just full scale, just joining another cult. I'm going to switch from religious cult to a political one. And no, I'm not going to do that. And I see a lot of people, when they deconvert, that's what they do. And I would submit to you that you're really not deconstructing from this idea, this cultic idea that somehow a title or an honorific conveys with it some authority over you. It doesn't. And just because the honorific goes from pastor to representative or bishop to senator or, pope to president, doesn't change the fact that it's still the same idea. And so deconstructing and reconstructing this to me is taking the sovereignty over your own life, taking control of your own life. But again, I would be interested in what all of you have to think and say about this issue. For those of you deconverting and deconstructing, I'm interested in your thoughts. This is a discussion starter. Do you see elements of Jim Palmer's statement true? What do you agree with or disagree with what I said? I'm always interested in this discussion because a lot of us are going through this. And so put your thoughts in the comments. I would very much appreciate it. Thanks for every like and share. I just want to give a shout out to my members. Thank you to my citizens and Rabyd citizens. You make these videos in particular very much possible, where I can talk about deconversion. These videos sometimes get the likes and shares and sometimes they don't. And you kind of balance that out and make sure that the income stream stays steady. So thank you very much to my members. And as always, live your best life. You only get one go around and then it's over. So you need to take all the best of your time, money, and opportunities and give them to yourself and to the people you love and care for, and to make this a better world. And don't waste them on the trappings of religion and faith. That's a death end. I speak from experience. And as always, thanks for stopping by, and I'll catch you next time.